I have 65 books to go through and wrap up with you guys. So, before I proceed, let's get into it. What up, book lovers? It is G-Swizz here, and yes, you read the title right, you heard me right. I've been in lockdown and I haven't done a wrap-up in a while. I really love doing monthly wrap-ups. Sometimes life gets in the way, and then before I know it, it's too late to do a wrap-up. So now I'm going to capture the wrap-ups of the months of June, July, and August. Literally Australian winter. If you are in the Northern Hemisphere, summer. Just the whole season. I don't want to keep doing seasonal wrap-ups because of how long they will take, but it's just because life has been getting in the way. I want to try to make this as quick as possible. So I will be speaking somewhat fast and somewhat briefly about these books. If you don't follow me on my Bookstagram yet, I actually track my reading on Bookstagram. So if you want to follow me on Bookstagram, if you have Instagram and want to follow me or my reading journey somewhere else, I would highly suggest you do that. Speaking of other social media platforms, this morning I literally opened a Book Talk account. I think I'm going to post something on there very soon. If I haven't posted on there yet, go follow me. I'm at G-Swizzle there. I really want to post more creative content on there as well. I just got to get into the wrap up, so let's go. I'm pretty sure the first book that I read in June was Realmbreaker by Victoria Aveyard. Now, if you guys don't know, this is a first book in a new series by Victoria Aveyard. This is not a part of the Red Queen universe whatsoever. So I was pretty intrigued because I loved Victoria Aveyard's writing within the Red Queen series. I'm not actually a big fan of the series itself, but I liked her writing and I knew that she could world build. So I wanted to try out Realmbreaker. And while the world building is fascinating, unfortunately, I wasn't too attached to the characters as much as I was like at the beginning of Red Queen. And it's really hard for me to not compare the two, but obviously when a specific work got you into an author's writing, it's honestly almost impossible not to compare. I tried not to, but I did a little bit. And I'm not saying that this isn't better than the Red Queen series because I didn't like the direction that the Red Queen series went in, but it was more like the character factor for me. I just couldn't feel connected to them as quickly as the Red Queen saga, but that being said, I like the world better in this one. I like the action, I like the grittiness better in this one. I wouldn't have too many complaints, but I would want to reread this one before I decide whether or not to continue on with the series. So I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars for now, but I will work out as to whether I want to reread in the future and I might change my mind. Who knows? But yeah, now that I know what to expect, I think that that would kind of be a good opportunity. And another new release that I read was Blade of Secrets by Trisha Levenseller. This book is also written by an author who I got into one of their previous works. So Trisha Levenseller is the author of the Daughter of the Pirate King duology. I loved that duology and I didn't want to be disappointed by Blade of Secrets. If you guys don't know, I haven't read any of Trisha Levenseller's standalones only because I find standalones really difficult for me to get into, because if I get into a standalone, I'm going to feel some sort of regret because I might have gotten attached to the characters and I won't be able to see them again after one book. Sometimes I feel that way. I know I had to let it go, but I prioritize series because of that. So when I heard that she was going to write a new series, I got really excited. This being said, this is the first book in a duology and it really feels like it's a first book in a series or a quartet because I don't think that it fully developed the characters enough to only have one more book after this book. It was really short. Some of you guys might be thinking that 300 pages is not that short. No. I believe that if it's a duology, especially if you're trying to fully flesh out a story and the characters, and if you really want to buy into what is happening, especially within this world, and especially if you're trying to build up a romance as well that has a lot of questionable factors to it, you would expand upon it a bit more. That's just my opinion. I really felt like this book was underwhelming in a way. I loved the concept and I loved the dynamic between the two sisters and just getting to know them, and I loved the main character. I liked the anxiety rep because as someone with clinical anxiety myself, I felt seen. Unfortunately, in terms of the plot and some of the directions inclusive of the romance, I don't think that it was fully fleshed out. It could have been even more. Maybe the sequel might change my mind. Maybe the sequel is going to be like 600 pages. I don't know that. But no, if it's going to be like a really short book and just resolves everything and is super convenient, then I don't know. I feel like I've wasted my time and money. So I'm just hoping that the sequel is going to be worthwhile, or maybe the series is just going to get an extension. So once again, this is a 3 out of 5 star read. We'll see how we go with the rest of the series. Now let's talk about a book that I love and I reread, and that, my friends, is The Princess Will Save You by Sarah Henning. I read this book book last year and fell in love, and I love it even more now. I already knew that I loved this book and nothing could stop that, but I just fell in love with it even more, and I found more aspects of it that I do love. I think the first time I read it, I said that there were flaws in it, but now, in my personal opinion, it's flawless. And have I read the sequel yet? No. And I think it's because I found out that this is going to be a trilogy and not a duology, which is really exciting because, oh my goodness, this series deserves a trilogy, period. That being said, I am a little bit intimidated, but I'm so excited to read The Queen Will Betray You after I read The Princess Will Save You. This one's 5 out of 5 stars, without a doubt. I'm gonna quickly address some manga that I read this month. So before I actually get into this stack, I want to mention that I finished the third part of Jojo's Bizarre Adventure. I had the last 3 volumes left on my TBR, and I read them during lockdown. So that's volume 8, volume 9, and volume 10. I like the ending of part 3. I think the ending is quite an iconic ending, especially with Dio's World. Definitely the ending gets like a solid, I'd say 4 out of 5 stars for me. I watched the anime like 2 years ago or something like that, and now rereading it in manga form, it's pretty much just reliving the anime. But let's not talk about the Promised Neverland anime, which was completely ruined. This manga volume that I'm holding up right now is volume 19. And funnily enough, this volume was spoiled in the anime in season 2 because what they decided to do was cut out like 5 arcs and skip to the end already. But let me tell you, it was worth reading the manga to get up to this point. This is the second last volume, so I don't want to spoil anything, but oh my goodness, everything that happens in this volume, oh, I loved it. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. And then Demon Slayer volume 21, back on my manga kick. It's sad. It ends with a cliffhanger, and we've got 2 more volumes left, but it was worth it. I think this is another 5 out of 5 stars for me. And then I read some of the Beastars series. Actually, these are 2 different parts of the Beastars universe. So this is just a continuation of Beastars. This is Beastars volume 12, and this is the Beast Complex. Now, if you, like myself, like the anime and like the little snippets of the lives of everyone else, I mean, you'll find that also in the Beastars manga. But if you want to find like little snippets of everyone else in the universe and not just the protagonist, the Beast Complex is the perfect series for you. I highly recommend the series. If you haven't checked it out yet, or you haven't checked out the first volume, I would recommend. Gave this around a 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm really looking forward to continuing if they decide to release more volumes in English. And with Beastars volume 12, once again, absolutely loved it. In fact, I recently watched the anime that just dropped on Netflix, the season 2 of the anime. Oh my goodness, it's giving me all the feels. I don't like the season 2 arc as much as I like the season 1 arc. That being said, it's still a really good time, and I really love following these characters. This one, I think I gave a 4 out of 5 stars as well. So in lockdown, I decided I was gonna read the Iron Face series by Julie Kagawa. What I have to say about the series is that it is one of my new favorite series. And I only just found out, someone commented on my video that this was meant to be a trilogy originally, and then it got expanded upon in a 4th book with a different character perspective. And oh my goodness, I am so happy I experienced this quartet in its fullest. I kind of feel envy for those people who read it before me and were hyping it up before me. So like, I don't really need to hype up the series at all because you guys already know. And you know, if you like any kind of fairy book and if you love YA, then this is like your go-to series. I don't really have much else to say about this except for the fact that I absolutely loved the series. I think The Iron Queen was my favorite book in the series. I think I gave this entire series a total of a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I loved how the 4th book ended with an absolute amazing lesson. Oh my goodness, Julie Kagawa, you know how to write. And I have another book series that I read by Julie Kagawa. I read the Talon Saga, which consists of Talon, Rogue, Soldier, Legion, and Inferno. And this one is a very interesting one because this is probably one of Julie Kagawa's least liked series by a lot of the community. And I think it's because a lot of people don't get past book 1 or 2, but I would highly suggest if anyone wants to read the series, just binge read the whole series and make up your mind. I think I binge read this entire series within like 3 or 4 days. Like, I was that invested in this world. The best way I can describe this book series is that, yes, of course, it's a fantasy, it's an urban fantasy, but it feels like a dystopian because these dragon shifters are trying to stop a corrupt system, and you feel that. If you like young adult dystopian, you'll like this series. I think that's what turns a lot of people off because a lot of people want to experience something that feels fantasy-like. And yes, of course, it feels fantasy-like, but I think first and foremost, it feels dystopian. I think I gave this series an overall 4 out of 5 stars. I just enjoyed my time, and I'm actually really happy that I bought the hardbacks because I had them sitting on my shelf for years, and I just never got the opportunity to just pick up and read them, and now I have, and I feel like I have not wasted my money. This was a worthwhile purchase. Did I not include Crush and Covet in my last wrap-up? If I didn't, then what a fail. I don't actually know, but what I do know is that I have been mentioning this in some of my videos as of recently, how the series changes direction in these 2 books. First time I read this book here, I was very bittersweet about it, and I ended up enjoying Covet Covet, as much as everybody keeps on saying it's a filler book, I enjoyed it more than what I was expecting to, because everybody kept on telling me that I was going to be disappointed. That being said, I really do want to reread these books in the lead up to Court. It's really funny because I already filmed my September TBR, and then literally like a day or two after I filmed it, Tracy Wolf announced that Court is gonna get pushed back due to a paper shortage. I don't know how to go about that. I think I gave these ones a 4 out of 5 stars, but that might change. I finally got to the Dare Dark Valkyrie series by Eva Chase. I didn't know this going into the series. This is a reverse harem series. This was my first reverse harem series that I read. I didn't know going into the series, but the love interests are like a bunch of Norse gods. So yeah, like Thor and Loki. Yeah, this is not like young adult. This is definitely new adult. There's a bunch of steam in here. So I originally picked it up because of the premise, because it was following a Valkyrie. It did have its steamy moments, but I kind of feel like that towards the end, it felt a little bit rushed and it felt a little bit too convenient. I felt that we could have had a little bit more development with some of the characters and some of the love interests. It was still a very entertaining read. I'd say that I didn't expect too much out of the series, but now that I'm looking at the reviews, a bunch of people wish that it was finished better. So I can understand why people are saying that. But overall, I think I gave the series like either a 3.5 out of 5 stars or a 4 out of 5 stars. It was enjoyable, it was entertaining, but yeah, it was that. And now I'm gonna talk about a series that kind of disappointed me in a way, and it disappointed a lot of the people who read the series, and that, my friends, is the Into the Crooked Place duology by Alexandra Christo. If you guys don't know, Alexandra Christo is the writer of To Kill a Kingdom, which is one of my favorite books ever. I love that book, and it's the favorite of many people. This series kind of just takes the backseat in a lot of situations, and the reason why I'm confident that it does is because it does not really compare to Kill a Kingdom in many people's eyes, so they're not hyping up this one as much as they're hyping up the other book. But I wanted to give it a shot, and I wanted to see if it was going to be an underrated gem, but unfortunately I was kind of let down. I felt like the series was a bit too rushed and could have been expanded upon a little bit more. At least in the first book, characters were going from A to B in certain situations, and you never actually knew how they got there. But also, it kind of felt like it was trying to copy Six of Crows in a way. I don't want to say that because not everything is a Six of Crows replica, but I just kind of felt that way, and I feel like a bunch of people have the same opinion as me. It gets a 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't great. And then I read an independently published series again, and that, my friends, is the Shadowfall series by Audrey Gray. Now, I actually read Shadowfall, I think, at the very beginning of this year, and it was very fast, very intense, but oh my goodness, I continued on with the series. All of it is just super intense, full of family drama, full of political chaos. If you do like young adult dystopians, once again, this is your thing. This is a young adult dystopian, but it is independently published, so I understand why not too many people are marketing it. I enjoyed my reading experience of it. Once again, I read it for entertainment's sake, not necessarily for attachment's sake. I mean, I did get attached to some of the characters, and I really enjoyed that part of the universe. Obviously, I kind of just wish that it was a bit more expanded upon, that I can kind of get even more attached. But that being said, it was a good, fast-paced read, very brutal at times. Oh my goodness. I think I gave this series a 3.5 out of 5 stars altogether. And to continue on with the independently published book, let me talk about the Red Winter trilogy by Annette Marie. This trilogy here is not being talked about enough. It is so good. I've already mentioned this on my channel. If you like Shadow of the Fox, without a doubt you will love this trilogy like I did. Words could not accurately describe how much I appreciate this trilogy. This is one of my new favorite trilogies of all time. As I'm filming this, I already just have the urge to reread it. It's a 5 out of 5 star trilogy. I read this entire trilogy within 24 hours. Please read it if you haven't yet. And if you're wanting to get into more independently published authors, and if you're wanting more recommendations, this is a recommendation. Take my recommendation, pick up Red Winter. You will not be disappointed. And then I read some more independently published books. You're gonna see a pattern here. I got back into the Awakens World. The first time I read this series, I don't even know if I did a wrap-up of the series on my channel, but let me just say that the first time I read it, I did enjoy the story, but I wasn't attached to the characters, and I kind of felt like I was skim reading it because I was reading it after a dense fantasy series that I absolutely loved, and I had a book hangover afterwards. I kind of just couldn't give it the attention that it deserved. And this time I decided, okay, I'm going to read it, I'm going to immerse myself in it and just soak it all in. I'm going to experience it in its fullest and just do my best to enjoy it as much as I possibly can. And I'm really happy I made that decision because that ended up coming to pass. I ended up loving the series. I ended up being fully immersed in it, and Vala and Aldrich are some of my favorite characters. I love the characters in the series. I love the world. I love The magic system, it's just honestly so intricate and so amazing, and this is definitely my favorite thing that I've read from Elise Kova so far. The Awakens series is like a 4.5 to a 5 out of 5 stars for me. And then I was a little bit disappointed by its follow-up, Awakens Vortex Chronicles. I was disappointed in this because I thought that based on the previous series, we would be seeing a continuation of the previous character stories as well as the main character story here, but we did not get a continuation. I found the series to be disappointing altogether. I loved the first half of the series. It went downhill at the end of Failed Future. Failed Future just simply failed the series for me. Oh my god, did I really make that comment? I was really disappointed in the final 2 books. Like, these 3 books were really good and they were building up to maybe bringing back the Awakens Chronicles characters in a follow-up way, but no, it was not a follow-up. The series went into a completely different direction. So I would say if you haven't read the Awakens series and if you're more interested in the concept of this, then yeah, I would highly recommend you read the series. You don't have to read the first series to read the second. But if you have read the first series and you're hoping that the second series is a continuation in a way for some of the Awakens characters, it's not at all. You're barely gonna get them. It's just really disappointing in that factor. The series gets a 3 out of 5 stars from me. I'm not saying that it's a poorly written series. It was just kind of mismarketed to me. And then I continued on with some other Elise Kova books. Yeah, I pretty much read 13 Elise Kova books. The Loom Saga. While I didn't like this as much as the first Awakens series, I really did enjoy it. And it's so different from the Awakens series in a sense that it's a more steampunk world. The characters are so different. The dynamics are so different. It kind of feels a little bit more adultish in a way. I mean, some people don't know whether to classify this as young adult or adult fantasy. I think Elise Kova was wanting to classify it as adult fantasy. I think I gave the series a 4 out of 5 stars because as much as I wasn't invested as much as the Awakens Chronicles, I still really did enjoy it. Gotta take that Coca-Cola break. The next book series I have to bring up is a book series that made me cry, and Camilo had to comfort me when I grieved about the series. That, my friends, is the Girl at Midnight trilogy by Melissa Gray. If you guys don't know, these hardback books have gotten out of print. I ended up snagging them last minute. I love these covers. After that hunt, I just decided it was time to actually give these books a go and actually read them. And I can kind of see why some people think that the series kind of almost replicates Daughter Smoke and Bone. It doesn't replicate it, but I'd say the beginning kind of does. It feels like Daughter Smoke and Bone from the very beginning, but then it completely changes direction and ends up becoming its own thing. Because of that criticism, I wanted to read the series before I reread Daughter Smoke and Bone, so that's what I ended up doing. Now with this series, I would say I enjoyed every bit of it until the ending. See, it's symbolic and it's beautiful, but at the very same time, there was no foreshadowing for it whatsoever, and it ended up shocking me so much that I just cried. It was hard for me. I was grieving. I ended up talking to Camilo about it. I ended up letting out my grief and my frustration and my sorrow and my sadness about the ending of the series, and that's what I've got to say. I have tissues with you. I loved the series. I got attached to the characters, but the very end of the trilogy might be heartbreaking for you as it was for me. I gave this book series a 4 out of 5 stars. Do I regret reading the series? No. Will I reread it in the future? Maybe. I kind of just want to see if there was foreshadowing for that moment, but I don't know. It came out of nowhere and it really saddened me. I see what the author was doing and what they did was symbolic, but it was still so heartbreaking. Let's get into some fun now. A series that did not make me feel heartbroken. I mean, at times it kind of just made me feel a lot of things, but at the very end of the series, it ended up being ultimately satisfying. And that, my friends, is the underrated trilogy that is The Conspiracy of Us by Maggie Holt. This book series, like I said, super underrated. If you want a good thrilling treasure hunt young adult series that has a good romantic plot, oh, I would recommend. I also binge read the series within a 24-hour span. I read each book back to back to back. I could not stop. The Ends of the World was not my favorite book in the series. It wasn't the best finale that I've ever read. That being said, I did like the ending of it, and the final few chapters I just was living for. It just could have been a lot more action-packed, but in a different way. But the sequel, Map of Fates, this, oh my goodness, had so much plot that I could sink my teeth into. It was the perfect sequel. This sequel easily is a 5 out of 5 stars for me. These books here, they're 4 out of 5 stars. I love The Conspiracy of Us and The Ends of the World, but this is probably one of the best sequels I've ever read in my entire life. I love it. And I love the direction it went in. The cliffhanger shocked me. I just needed to continue on, and that's what I did. I continued on. I just could not help myself with the series. I would recommend it. It's so good. Please pick it up. Please pick it up. Oh, I also ended up reading Bloodlike Magic by Lizelle Sambury. I was so right to put this on my most anticipated reading list. I was so shocked by how much I ended up really loving the book. Not only that, I remember I was like sitting at my desk here and Camilo was sitting at his desk over there, and me just finishing the book and talking to Camilo or venting to Camilo about the plot, how intricate it was, just explaining the crazy plot twists that like are really difficult to explain. If you've read this book, you know exactly what the insane plot twists are. I am really looking forward to the sequel. Funny thing about me putting this book on my TBR is that I put it on my TBR because it was going to be a romantic subplot and it had to do with sacrifice, and that would stir up the angst. That subplot was really good, but I ended up leaving this book absolutely loving the family dynamics in this book. Like, this book is more family orientated than it is romantic orientated. I love that, and I didn't realize that I would love that until I finished it and realized, oh my goodness, I love this household. I love everyone in this book series. So I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars because it felt slow at times, so that's the only reason why I duck it down from a 5 out of 5 stars, but it picked up and it was just the perfect balance. I reread Serpent and Dove and I have officially changed my opinion on it. It gets a 4 out of 5 stars. It's no longer a 2.5 out of 5 stars. It got a 2.5 out of 5 stars originally because it was triggering, and the first time that I read it when I was currently going through my deconstruction of evangelicalism. I didn't know whether I was ready for a book like this, and I realized after finishing it that, oh my goodness, I actually needed a book like that. And then I continued on with the series this year after I went through my deconstruction of evangelicalism. What I have to say is I definitely resonate more than I did when I first read Serpent and Dove, and I'm really happy that I read it again in this stage of my life and realized how much I could resonate with Reed. I didn't like Reed when I first read the book. A bunch of the plot elements of the books made me feel uneasy because there are a lot of religious themes to me that are triggering and that are hurtful, that were really hard for me to read, and I'm pretty sure anybody who has gone through similar things to what I went through will resonate. This series is a good series overall. It's definitely still rooted in its young adult romantic plot, but I think that the romantic plot is very important for the series and what it represents. At the end of the day, it's not about where you grew up or who you were raised by. It's about who you are deep down inside. And Lou didn't want to grow up in her witch family because she knew that she had to be sacrificed and she knew what they were doing was wrong. And then Reed grew up within his environment, and then he realizes that what Lou was going through, like, that's not her fault at all. That's not on her. But also he has to take away his own biases. I loved that about the series. Gods and Monsters was really heartbreaking, but it was still a really good finale. I'd say that this trilogy gets a 4 out of 5 stars from me overall. I've got to talk about a book series that I put on my previous TBR that I actually did end up binge reading, Cruel Prince Trilogy by Holy Black. I remember reviewing the first book on my channel, but never really getting it, never really understanding it. I feel like now that I'm older and wiser, I could really understand the series, or maybe it was because that I reread it and I kind of knew what to expect, like a hate to love situation, and everybody loves Jude and Carden, but why do people love Jude and Carden, and what are their actual love languages? Seem to have a love language of hate, my goodness. Third time of reading the first book, and my second time of reading the second book, and my first time reading the last book. The series was really good. I just kind of wish that it was a little bit expanded upon in the final book. The final book just felt like a really rushed ending, but it was still a very enjoyable series. Solid 4 out of 5 stars. And then I discovered one of my favorite series of all time. But the catch is, I actually read this series a few years ago and I didn't like it. People change over the years. That is honestly the best thing about book reading. So I gained a change of heart when it came to the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy by Laini Taylor. As I mentioned, I wanted to reread this series after I read the Girl at Midnight series because I didn't want the series to taint my view of the Girl at Midnight. When I reread the series, I was just laughing because people's criticism is pretty valid when it comes to the beginning of the Girl at Midnight series. It is pretty similar in the way that it starts. That being said, it definitely becomes something else, and oh my goodness, this series is so good. I remember saying that Strange the Dreamer was the better series. I don't even know that anymore. I love the Daughter of Smoke and Bone series. This is one of my favorite series of all time now, and I honestly don't really know how to deal. And I'm really happy that I bought these repackaged editions as well, because I was thinking to myself, I don't really like the series that much, or I don't actually know whether I like the series that much, but if I buy the repackaged editions, maybe I will be motivated to pick it up again. And I did. The series is so much better than what I remembered it being. I mean, that being said, I barely remember anything about my first read of it. it, and I probably don't remember anything about my first read about it because I ended up like skimming after the first book. I think halfway through the first book I just skimmed the series because the first book I felt like dragged until it got to its point, and I just did not remember anything from my first read except being super confused. And now I understand why I was super confused, because you have to really pay attention from the very beginning until the very end. You cannot slack off the entire time you read the series. You have to be paying attention in order to get the full payoff, and that's what I did this time, and I'm really happy that I did it. I think the first and third books get a 5 out of 5 stars for me, but the second book, Days of Blood and Starlight, kind of dragged a little bit, so I would give that one a 4 out of 5 stars. But that being said, I love the series and I'm obsessed with it. And the final book series that I have to wrap up is the Crown of Fevers series by Nikki Powell Preto. I started reading the series right after Daughter Smoke and Bone. It was really difficult for me to have like a follow-up to Daughter Smoke and Bone because Daughter Smoke and Bone was that good. But that being said, the series was still a really good time. I didn't love it as much as Daughter Smoke and Bone for obvious reasons, but that being said, I loved the world and I loved these characters and I love how the characters develop eventually. I do think that the series did kind of go on for longer than I would have wanted it to. There were some character plot lines in here that I wasn't as invested in as the main plot. I kind of felt like some POVs were somewhat unnecessary. That being said, I still really enjoyed the series and I gave it an overall 4 out of 5 stars. I'd say that all of them I liked at an equal level, but I did like the development of the series. So I guess that's gonna be it for this wrap up today, book lovers. If you happen to enjoy the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already. Join the amazing community of book lovers. And I also have social medias. I'm at GSwizzleBooks on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at GSwizzle on Book Talk. And I also have Goodreads. That's www.goodreads.com/gswizzle. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later. Peace.
Started out with half and I flipped it into double. Started out with half and I flipped it into double.